Welcome to Gold Soul, where empowered parenthood and conscious living meet. I'm Jessie, a licensed home birth midwife, here to explore birth, parenting, and personal growth. Through real stories, reflections, and chats with holistic experts, we'll uncover fresh insights, heartfelt support, and a bit of humor. Let's laugh, learn, and grow together through the beauty and challenges life brings. Hi. I'm Jessie Rockwell, a licensed home birth midwife based out of Southern California. This is the Gold Soul podcast, and I wanted to take the time to introduce myself and really talk a little bit about what led me to starting this podcast and what the vision for this space is. My journey into midwifery started with the birth of my first kiddo, who's 12 years old. I went into that birth extremely naive, uneducated, and a little bit ignorant. I grew up in a very Western medicine household. My mom was a bedside nurse for many years and then pursued a path in pharmaceuticals. And when I got pregnant, I took the very conventional, traditional route of having hospital birth. And I took the hospital classes because I didn't know otherwise. I wasn't educated at all on alternatives and other options and empowerment around birth. I tell this story often about how excited and elated I was in that pregnancy. It was my first pregnancy. I was going to have a baby. And I grew up loving babies so much, and it was now my turn to have my little baby. And I remember sitting in that office of my OBGYN who had came highly referred to me from some coworkers, and I was just so excited and just buzzing with excitement. I waited for about 45 minutes. When I had gotten into the office, I waited even longer. And I remember a nurse practitioner walked in and she seemed very rushed, very flustered, stressed. Not once was I asked, how was I feeling? I wasn't told congratulations, but instead she instantly went into how I was overweight and, the complications that could bring in the pregnancy and the birth. And I was just so deflated. It was so heartbreaking for me. It was not what I had experienced or I thought that experience was going to be. Never once got to meet the doctor. So I thought, okay, well, maybe the next time it'll be better because I'll actually get to meet the doctor. So my next visit, I went in, waited for quite a fair amount of time in the waiting room. There were a lot of moms and families expecting there. And then I got in and I met a different nurse that time, waited longer. And then the doctor came in and she didn't once make eye contact with me. She was looking at my chart. She mentioned similar comments about my weight. And it was an in and out situation. And I was just crushed. That, okay, I guess I had too high of expectations. This is what it's going to be. The rest of the pregnancy kind of followed similar patterns of that. And I got a little nervous as we got closer to, the birthing window. And I think I was about 35 weeks pregnant. I had gone out to Palm Springs with some girlfriends. I was very pregnant, very uncomfortable, and it was very hot. And I was poolside. I remember this woman staring at me. And now I know that stare. And if you've been pregnant and if you've had a baby and you see other pregnant women, you know this stare. And it is a stare of, oh, look how radiant she is. I want to go talk to her. She's pregnant. How exciting. And so she found her way up to me and she's like, congratulations. And, she asked me when I'm due. And she asked me, well, what's your birth plan? And I looked at her. What do you mean my birth plan? My plan's to have a baby. What do you mean? And she said, well, are you having the baby in a hospital? I said, yeah, I'm having the baby in a hospital. I did not realize that there were alternative options to that. Then she goes, well, she asked, did you take a childbirth class? And I said, yeah, I took classes at the hospital. And you could tell she knew my number, right? She goes, it's a really great documentary you should watch. It's called The Business of Being Born. It's kind of like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So fast forward, never watched the documentary at that time and ended up being induced at 40 weeks and 3 days for preeclampsia. I had gone to my weekly prenatal appointment and they took my blood pressure 6 times and it was extremely elevated each time. And they basically said, okay, you're going straight to the hospital. And I said, what do you mean I'm going straight to the hospital? You're going to be induced. And I said, well, can I go home and get my stuff? Like this wasn't the plan, And they said, you can grab your things, but then you need to go straight to the hospital. So we went straight to the hospital and started the induction. And again, I didn't know that there were options. And I feel like many women can resonate with this, and it's sad for me to say this, but I didn't even know I could ask questions. I didn't even know that I could say no, which is silly, right? It's our body. It's our experience. We have every right to ask all the questions and say no and ask for alternatives, but I didn't know that. So started on some Pitocin and things got real fast. I ended up wanting an epidural very early on and it wasn't recommended at the time. And so they had done, the good old switch and bait of, well, I guess it's not switch and bait, but they had asked, well, do you want something to just take the edge off? I didn't even ask what it was. So I was given some fentanyl. And then when it was time to get an epidural, I got the epidural and I just felt so sick and I felt just so unwell. I remember in that experience. And it was a pretty fast induction. 21 hours later, she was born and there were complications during the birth. She had to be taken away for a little bit and I had suffered some complications as well. So fast forward, I don't want to go into all the nitty gritty of that, but we were discharged a few days later. And then we found our way back in the hospital, both of us. And I remember calling my doctor's office multiple times with concerns. And I remember the first time I had called, I was dismissed and said, yeah, we'll leave a message. She'll call you back. But if you're really worried, just go to the hospital. I said, well, I'd like to talk to her first to make sure I'm not overreacting. But she never called me back, called again the next day. And they basically had said the same thing. And then finally we went back to the hospital. And yeah, so there were complications left and right. The first time I got to even talk to my doctor was at the 6-week postpartum visit. And I was excited for this visit. I wanted to run through the birth with her and ask her questions, get her professional insight on what had happened. And she just looked at me and she said, no, everything's fine. Everything's great. Everything's fine. I was like, there's no way that was normal. Like I was back in the hospital. My baby had to go back in the hospital. There's no way that that's normal. And I realized at that point that this is a flawed system. There's so much that's wrong with this. And in the in-between of that, we were struggling with lactation issues, which now knowing what I know, should have been counseled on that before we were even discharged, that was a huge risk with some of the complications we had experienced. The medications I was given, which later found out too, against my consent and didn't find out until I requested my hospital records in my second pregnancy. But that's also another story. So had worked with a lactation counselor and went into this appointment with this gal, and she had asked me, well, tell me your birth story. I told her my birth story, and she looked at me and she held me, and she was so compassionate and she was so empathetic. She said, that must have been so hard. Did you have a doula? Did you have any support persons? I said, wait, did I have a what? And she said, a doula. And I was like, I've never heard that word before. She's like, yeah. And she explained to me what a doula was. And it was like this aha light bulb moment. At the time, I used to work in a very corporate job, had a whole different career, but I just felt this calling. I just felt this is where I belonged, and the thought that, okay, you can help educate and empower and love on and hold families as they're navigating one of the most exciting and kind of scary moments of their life. Like, what an honor. So I took a training when my daughter was little. She was just a few months old, and volunteered at a local birth center and just fell in love with the work. Then met a wonderful friend who was also new on her journey, into birth work, and we decided to start a doula agency together. And we were so excited for this, to just immerse ourselves in this community. And one thing led to another. I was pregnant with my second baby, knew that I was not going to birth in the hospital. We were not going to go that route again, and ended up at the end of that pregnancy having her at home. It was a home birth with an amazing midwife, and it was so redemptive. It was so healing. It was this water birth in front of the fireplace, listening to Otis Redding, and it was everything I had dreamt of that experience to be. And I never went back to my corporate job. We had a kind of like a pregnancy and parenting support center where we had other providers working there. And we held all sorts of different classes and groups, and it was awesome. And I just had this fire inside of me that this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And throughout that second pregnancy, I kept getting these whispers of midwifery. Like I would read it in a book, and I would, see something of, just this nudge, this whisper of this is where the path you're supposed to take. And it was right after the second kiddo was born, that I was like, yep, I'm going to go down that path. I'm going to become a midwife. And so I started midwifery school when she was really little. And I remember going to my midwife and I was like, can I learn under you? Like, I just admire you so much, and I really look up to you, and can I learn under you? And she's like, I don't take students when they're postpartum. Like, you need to focus on being a mom. And I remember being so sad because like, what? But now I am so thankful that there was that consideration. She did end up letting me come on board because she saw my dedication and that, I was able to balance it. So I started under my midwife, and it was such an amazing experience. And for me, the journey into birth work and the journey into becoming a midwife, and a doula, it was never because, and still isn't because, I think that everyone should have a home birth. And some of you have probably heard me say this before, but it's that everyone deserves the love and the compassionate care and the empathy that, in my opinion, community-based midwives provide. It's just different than normal in-hospital OB care. And I think everyone deserves that. Everyone deserves that love, and to have someone as a cheerleader and as equally excited as they are, and to care about them as a person, even if, the journey into this pregnancy wasn't what they had envisioned, and there's apprehensions, to have someone that is going to hold you as you navigate that, someone that's going to empower you and help educate you in knowing your options, regardless of what their personal opinions are. I think that was a really big one for me. And to this day, I don't think that home birth is for everyone, but everyone deserves that level of care, and everyone deserves to know their options and to be empowered and to have the autonomy of their experience, right? Informed consent is huge. Anyway, so yeah, my journey into midwifery school, it was long. It takes most people about 3 years to finish midwifery school through the didactic as well as the clinical. I had a lot of big life changes during that process, a couple cross-country moves until I finally finished. And during that time, I was able to gain a lot of experience working at a birth center locally and seeing how different that world is, as well as community-based home birth midwives. And that was such a blessing. It was so much hands-on experience that I previously hadn't had to that level. And just, again, seeing how operations work a little differently. So yeah, to this day, it's been about 12 years of attending births, hundreds and hundreds of births, from lots of hospital births as a doula, cesareans, some wonderful home twins and breeches, and it's been just amazing. And I then went to birth 2 more babies at home. So it's magical. It's been a magical journey, and being in private practice by myself, in solo private practice, is so special. And I knew that that's where my heart really was compared to like a birth center, for example, because the level of connection I make with my clients, I think, is really unique, because I'm their person. It's just me and them. We joke about, it's family-centered care. Bring your family and bring your bestie and bring your auntie and bring all your kids. But it's also family-centered care because you're going to see my family too. So we make those jokes, but really it's because that trust that is built during prenatal care is really unique, right? Like, You're inviting someone into the most sacred and intimate moment of your life. And it's really important that you can lean into them and that when they're in your presence during your birthing time, you can surrender and you can step out of that mama brain and just let go and do the work you need to do and look at your midwife, look at your birth team and know, oh, they've got me. I'm good. I can surrender. And the way we get there is, the foundation is laid through that prenatal care and really getting to know each other. I want to know what makes you tick. I want to know your fears. I want to know your hopes. I want to know how you feel best loved and cared for. And in turn, I want you to see me as a fellow mom, not just your midwife, not just the practitioner. So a lot of times my clients they meet my whole family and they see me just as another person, and that trust is there and they know me inside and out. They know my intentions. So that's a little bit about my history. I had this calling to start this podcast. It came about a few different ways. So I've always loved talking. I really like talking. I really like connecting with people. Ever since I was little, it's kind of my thing. I really thrive on community. I really thrive on meaningful connections. Having 4 kids and having had a lot of different life experiences, I think there's beauty in vulnerability and there's beauty in connection of hardships and growing together and soul seeking and, self-improvement emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, all the things. And I have always admired those that had podcasts and thought, oh, that's so cool. But, a lot of us suffer from imposter syndrome. I thought, I could never do that. Who's going to want to listen to me? And I haven't been a midwife for 20 years, like some of my, really esteemed colleagues. Like, no one's going to want to listen to me. I had a client who is going to be on an episode with me. You're going to get to meet her. And she's amazing. And she's a really phenomenal psychic medium. During one of her postpartum visits, she's like, you really need to have a podcast. And I was like, hey, she's like, no, you really do. It's in the cards for you. You're supposed to. Like, okay. And then I had a couple other people tell me, just give me that nudge and kind of, whatever your spiritual beliefs are, I call them God whispers, right? Like just those little seeds of confirmation, like this is the path you're supposed to be on. It's similar to, how I found my calling to midwifery. And so I was like, all right, let's do it. So I bought some equipment and it sat in a box for years. For years, I didn't touch this equipment because I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do it. Anyway, here we are. So my vision with this is to be a space, a little corner in the world of podcasts on the internet, right? To just connect really, whether we're talking about pregnancy and birth preparation and postpartum, if we're talking about the transition and the journey into parenthood. We're talking about, soul growth and self-improvement, conscious living, all of the things, birth stories. It's just to be this place to come to and connect and hopefully feel seen, feel validated, maybe learn something new, maybe share some laughs. My plan is for it to be a mixed model of having some wonderful guest speakers on, whether they're practitioners in the conscious living or holistic community, the birth space in general, or they're moms that are here to share their birth story, or just me popping on and saying hello and sharing what's on my mind. But I'm really honored to be here. I'm a little nervous, a little intimidated, but I'm really honored and I'm really excited to connect with all of you. You can find me on Instagram at Gold Soul Midwifery, or my website is goldsoulmidwifery.com. I love a good chat. I love connecting. So please feel free to make that connection. If there are any suggestions, if you have anything you want to contribute, I would love to have you on. So thank you for your time. Thank you for trusting me with this little corner. And I look forward to many, many more chats with you. Have a great day, guys. See you soon. Thank you for joining me on this journey of growth, connection, and conscious living. If you found value in today's episode, share it with someone you love, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a moment. Follow me on Instagram at Gold Soul Midwifery and sign up for the newsletter to stay connected and in the loop. Until next time, stay grounded, keep growing, and remember, your gold soul shines brightest through the beautiful and messy moments of life.